We have everybody but Jill Nelson.
Are we ready?
We might as well get started.
Everyone's here. I mean, we got a quorum, obviously. I'm looking, I don't see Jill. I guess she's here, but okay. Call to order the March 23rd, 2022 meeting of the Mineland Reclamation Board. With that, I would ask for a motion to approve the minutes of the February meeting.
Moved.
Is there a second?
Second, Anthony.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, same sign. Hearing none, the minutes are approved. It's time for the approval of the continuances and withdrawals, and there are none. So we'll move on to the Executive Director report, Mr. Mock.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Tim Mock, Deputy Director for the Department of Natural Resources. I'm actually making my way to Montrose this morning for the Stakeholder Advisory Group meeting regarding the implementation of Proposition 114 and the reintroduction of gray wolves. Regarding wolves, you might have seen in the news lately here, Parks and Wildlife officers delivered 6 burros to rancher Don Gittleson in Walden in an attempt to decrease wolf depredations on his property. After becoming acclimated to the climate and altitude, the burros will be introduced to Gittleson's herd of cattle. The idea is to make the burros become part of the cattle herd to where they will start to protect or consider the cattle as a member of its family. Don will start to introduce the burros to certain members of the herd in small increments. We actually learned about this potential depredation prevention opportunity here through Animal Services, where they seem to have some success with wild burros in similar herds in Oregon. So we're kind of running a test pilot here and continue to look for opportunities to prevent game damage. Colorado State Forest Service is rolling out the ability to use technology to greatly increase the pace of activities that allow the best science and modeling available to be incorporated in the hazardous fuels mitigation and watershed protection treatments that are planned by the State Forest Service. This move to this software will decrease the time spent by professionals prepping for these treatments and ensuring that our objectives are being met to a high standard. In addition, by housing the inventory data for the entire state in one electronic format in one location, the State Forest Service will gain the ability to use the data to better track and monitor trends in forest health concerns and tree growth for carbon modeling at a statewide level. Also, the State Forest Service has released the 2021 report of the health of Colorado forests. In the report, it offers insights and analysis of what Colorado is doing to improve the health of our forests and address wildfires, insects, outbreaks, and more during persistent dry conditions. State Forester Matt McCombs will also present this information to the House Ag Committee on April 11th. You can view the report by going to the State Forest Service's website. And then finally, about 2 weeks ago, the JBC during figure setting approved every decision item for DNR, including Parks and Wildlife, CWCB, and DWR as requested, with a few standard technical modifications. Combined with the committee's previous actions on DRMS, OGCC, and the State Land Board, we managed to get the most ambitious budget request in DNR's recent history approved in full. And it's really a tremendous accomplishment. My hat's off to the divisions for very good work in putting together their budget requests. DNR's budget requests for the 2022-23 budget includes increases to support outdoor recreation and conservation initiatives, protect and manage the state's scarce water resources, and expand outreach to engagement on important natural resources. Also, it includes the addition of a DNR tribal liaison position and the Parks and Wildlife Big Game Policy report and opportunities to implement those recommendations, as well as operating funds for the new state park at Sweetwater Lake. And Mr. Chair, that concludes my report, and open any questions if there are.
Any questions? do you know offhand, I know it's not directly in your department, what kind of monies we're capturing on the gambling, the betting thing that goes into the water pot? I mean, how much money we got there and what are we looking at doing? And that, I'm just curious.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Mr. Chair. I don't have that at my fingertips right this moment, but I'll be sure to pull those up and share those out here with the board and include it in the written minutes.
I think it's exceeding what we anticipated. That's why I'm curious. So.
Yeah, no, I think we are doing very well.
Okay. Yeah. Are there any ideas on where it's going to be allocated? You know that yet, or?
Not yet. I mean, I think some of this really kind of goes into the water plan implementation. We're working on the water plan right now and expect to have that completed at the end of this year. And then we'll kind of move into implementation. And so I think the completion of that report is going to provide some significant guidance.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you, Tim. Well, Mr. Means, you're up. I hope you can fill those shoes.
Yeah, I hope so too and stuff. This is Russ Means for the division doing the director's report today. I hope the board will join me in wishing Ginny well. She's sitting in a dental chair today and stuff and that. So hopefully she'll get through that ordeal and stuff. So with that said, I have two items and stuff to bring to the board's attention. The first one is that our rules and stuff were submitted to the Secretary of State on March 15th, and they should be published on Friday the 25th. So that officially starts our formal process for rulemaking. The board will be receiving a packet with red lines, a tracking sheet, all the notices and comments and stuff from our informal stakeholders in that probably right around the first of the month, sometime end of next week, so that you can start looking at those changes and educating yourself and stuff as to where we're heading on that. We also plan on in April being able to spend a little bit of time with you to go over the process and do a little bit of prep work and stuff that, so that when we go into promulgation of the rules in May, you're all up to speed on that. And the second thing is DRMS Active Minds staff will be joining other sister agencies and returning to the office. Staff will be doing a hybrid schedule with being in the office 2 days a week and then being able to work from home the other 3. We are rolling that out. June 1st and stuff will be the day and stuff that really implements. In between now and June 1st and stuff, we're in a transition period so that staff with kids in school and stuff can get past that before we move into our new business model. So with that, Secretary Singleton and stuff, or Board Chair Singletary, I am done. Thanks.
Any questions of Mr. Means? Okay, thank you, Russ. Again, now we move on. We're moving along to the consent agenda, which is the aggregate industry situation in Weld County. I think Peter Hayes is going to fill us in on that. Maybe he's not.
Mr. Singletary, yeah, we don't really have a presentation regarding that item. It is spelled out in the consent agreement that is signed by the operator. They consent to the violation and are not contesting it. So unless the board has any specific questions regarding that issue, we're available for that if you do.
Is the board comfortable with that? I guess they've agreed to is a $5,000 fine. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Any discussion from the board? Would someone want to make a motion? We need a motion to accept that agreement. Is that correct? would somebody make a motion to accept the staff's agreement?
Sure, this is Lauren. For file number M-2004-051, I move that we approve the consent agenda, and in so doing approve the staff recommendations, the civil penalty, and the operator's acceptance of those recommendations and penalty.
Seconding.
There's second. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Nobody's going to say aye. Okay. Those opposed, same sign. Hearing none, the motion is passed. So we'll move on to staff discussion. I don't know whether, and because it happens frequently here, I don't know whether my internet's jacked up today. It normally is. Hopefully we'll get a little more broad in our state, but if it's, I apologize. But we'll move on to the staff discussion.
Okay, we have two items today. Brock Bowles is going to be doing some education or informational stuff on reclamation. And then I have a riveting discussion on the history of temporary cessation. So, yeah, and that. Brock, if you want to go first and that, then I will bring up I'll do the second one and stuff, and that we'll go from there. So, thank you.
All right. Good morning. Let me get this set up to share my screen. Does everybody see the title page for that?
Yes.
All right. All right. Well, good morning. My name is Brock Bowles. I've been with DRMS now for 12 years. Pardon me 1 second. There we go. So I've been with DRMS now for 12 years. I've worked both in the coal and minerals programs. Before DRMS, I earned my master's degree from ecological restoration from CSU Fort Collins. And today what we're going to look at is we're going to look at the mining practices that DRMS uses to ensure successful reclamation. And successful reclamation of a mine site includes the development of a plant community after mining is complete. Plant communities are groups of plants that grow together in a shared habitat. The native forest, prairies, and the wildflower meadows that we see around us, they just didn't appear. They evolved into living entities. And this is the way we have to approach reclamation. We have to create the conditions that plant communities for them to develop, thrive, and be sustainable. And many of the reclamation practices that the coal and minerals rules and also DRMS implements, they're designed to actually complement this natural process of how plant communities come together and develop. So we're going to start by taking a brief look of how plant communities, how they naturally develop, how soils develop alongside of plant communities, and then we're going to look at how the minerals and coal rules complement this natural process. Oop, the other way. So this is just a general diagram that shows the natural process. And on the left here, you can see that this is the exposed rocky area that happens after some kind of disturbance. And it could be a natural disturbance, it could be mining, it could be a landslide, you know, any number of volcano events or anything like that. But this is where plant succession starts. It's right over here. Can you guys all see my pointer? Does that show up there?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So the first set of species to move into this area is actually lichens and mosses, because they have this remarkable ability to colonize in an area without actually needing soil. They attach directly to rocks, And they slowly start to break down the rocks, along with other natural processes such as weathering, freezing, thawing, all that stuff. But from just the plant point of view, it's the mosses and lichens that really start breaking down the rocks. And what happens here is the soil starts to develop, the little tiny pieces of rock, the plant moss, the mosses and the lichens, their bodies, when they grow and die and go through their life cycle, they fall between the rocks. And this becomes the earliest stages of soil development. Now, when the soil starts getting thick enough to support life, what comes in next is the annuals. And that puts us right about here on this chart. And the annuals like this area because annuals don't like deep, rich soil. They're really good at just these shallow soils. And the other thing is there's no competition here. It's just annuals. That's it. Annuals complete their life cycle in one season, hence the name annuals. But what that also means is they don't have time to wait for competition or wait for the resources to become available. They can't wait for the right moment. They need everything right now, fast, because they're done by the end of the year. So as their bodies, as they grow and die over many, many years, they contribute more organic matter to the soil. They can help break down the rocks. This starts creating the conditions for annuals because the soil profile is getting a little bit deeper. Now the annuals start liking this. So they start moving in. Where's my pointer? So now we're getting up to about here. And now the annuals, because they can take a couple years to complete their life cycle, they start absorbing the nutrients. They lock the nutrients away in their body, and that effectively robs the nutrients from the annuals. So that the perennials start edging out, slowly start edging out the annuals. And this is normal. Now, perennial plant bodies are a little bit bigger. Think of penstemons, think of bunch grasses, those kinds of things. So as their bodies start to grow, they actually form little protective areas for shrubs. Now, traditionally, shrubs and grasses don't get along, but there is an element that grasses do provide some protection for shrubs. And it's a slower process of getting shrubs involved, but they eventually do start getting into these grassy perennial areas. And as I've said a couple of times, this process is very slow. By the time they've broken down the soil, the annuals get in, the perennials get in, shrubs get in. This could take eons. We're talking like centuries before this can happen, millennia. All right, so next we're going to take a quick look at soils. How have they been developing alongside this plant community? Topsoils, they're probably the single most important element into reestablishing a plant community. And this is because the soil type, its properties determine what plant community it actually can support, or in some places, it just can't support. So let's take a quick look at topsoils here. So soil has three major components. It's the mineral material, the organic material, and the microbes. And the mineral material is actually the weathered parent material. And what we mean by parent material is what was there before the soil formed. So at some time in history, wind, water, glaciers, a volcano, or more realistically, a combination of all these forces deposited some kind of soil on the landscape. Then that material started to break down, as we talked about a little bit of the weathering process. And the parent material is actually very important because the different kinds of material that was deposited has different physical and chemical properties. So here are two examples of soil profiles. These are not in Colorado, but they're just great examples of what to see. On the left, upper left here, what you see is this is volcanic ash deposited on top of glacier till. On the right here, this is an alluvial deposit. This was deposited by a river. Now, the obvious difference of these is color, and color starts giving us some clues as to what the chemical properties are going to be of the soil. A little bit of subtle differences is if you look down here on the glacier till, that soil you can tell is very dense and compact, which is very different from the alluvial deposit on the right. And these differences in properties, they've really determined nutrient availability, how water flows through a soil, and ultimately which species of plant can actually grow at this site. Moving on to organic matter. This is the decomposed plant and animal material that's in the persists in the soil. The organic material is the reservoir of nutrients in the soil. As the organic matter breaks down, nutrients become available to the plants. So think of organic matter as your long-term, slow-release fertilizer of your soil. It also increases water infiltration, water holding capacity, resists compaction. It's got a lot of great qualities. Now, organic matter in soil is very hard and expensive to replace, and especially in mining, because the quantity that you need, like across like tens or maybe even hundreds of acres, it would be a very large amount. It also needs to be incorporated in the soil. It can't just sit on top. So even after we hauled in a lot of material, we got to till it in. So organic matter is very important to preserve, just because it's almost cost prohibitive to like try and import. The third part of soils are the microbes. And these are the life forms that actually live in the soil: the fungus, the bacteria, algae, protozoa, to a lesser extent, insects. But what microbes do is they feed on the organic matter in the soil, breaking it down, making the nutrients available to the plants. Plants themselves don't have a digestive system. You know, later on today, you and I are we're going to go out and have some pizza and beer. And what our bodies are going to do is determine what parts of the pizza and beer it needs, and it's going to discard the rest. Plants don't have that ability to digest. That's what the microbes do for them. They are completely dependent on microbes to feed them the nutrients that they need. In exchange, plants give the microbes sugar, because that's what plants produce in their photosynthesis process are actually sugars. So it's a symbiotic relationship. And it's actually, we're learning through more studies coming out that microbes and plants are quite dependent on each other. Now, microbes are also the most vulnerable part of the soil because they need air, food, and water to survive. If we remove any one of these three, we've just killed our topsoil. All right, so now that was a quick overview of some of the ecological processes of how plant communities develop. Now we're going to look at some of the rules and the practices of DRMS, which we use to support these processes. And the first thing that happens at any mine site is we have to preserve that topsoil. The topsoil, as we talked about, it's probably the single most valuable resource to getting that plant community healthy again. So the next few slides, we're going to look at how the rules actually protect topsoil. Under the title of each rule here, under the title, you'll see two rules. The rule on the left is the construction hard rock rule, and the rule on the right is the coal rule that actually address topsoil and the item that we're talking about. So these two rules in particular actually specify the topsoil will be salvaged and segregated from other materials. Before the topsoil is removed, we have to remove that excess biomass. You can see here in the picture on the left, they actually removed the sagebrush plant community. We need to get rid of those big branches, big root clumps, because they just interfere with machinery, cause voids in the soil, interfere with the cedar, that kind of stuff. So we got to get rid of that big stuff. After the topsoil has been removed, it needs to be stored in a location where it won't be disturbed by mining operations. We want to avoid compaction, so away from high traffic areas. It can't be used for equipment storage. I actually had one mine using the topsoil stockpile as an MSHA parking berm for the big equipment. No, can't be done. You want to avoid possible contamination. You want to place the topsoil in a stockpile, like on the uphill side of where the work is being done. Because if there's any contaminants or any runoff from the work area of the mine, we don't want it running into the topsoil. You also want to avoid areas where water accumulates. You don't want your topsoil sitting in a pool of water. And you want to handle as little as possible. Relocating a stockpile actually requires a DRMS approval, and that's what these two rules around here specifically address. You want to control erosion. The stockpiles must be in a configuration to control wind and water erosion. This may include structures like erosion wattles or silt fence. Getting vegetation established on stockpiles is also required. That's an effective tool for actually controlling erosion. It keeps the microbes alive in the soil, prevents weed invasions. And it's especially important to keep noxious weeds off of topsoil stockpiles, because when you if a noxious seed bank gets into a stockpile, when you redistribute it during reclamation, you actually make the noxious weeds distributed across your site bigger. So we really do watch noxious weed invasions on the topsoil piles. In the coal rules, they do require signs on your topsoil piles. Mineral rules doesn't require that, but we really do highly encourage it. Slopes need to be graded to 3:1 or less, or a demonstrated safety factor of 1.3. And steeper terrains, like in the mountains, over here, the rule of thumb is approximate original contour, just kind of put it back to what it was. The rules we do have provisions for special situations like steep slopes, terraces, and high walls. After the slopes have been graded, the subsoil has become very compacted because of all the equipment driving on that subsoil. And what has to be done now is you got to rip that subsoil up. You want to prevent that slippage zone from happening between the subsoil and the topsoil layer. So in this picture, you can see that the bottom of this small gully is flat. And this is the result of water percolating through the topsoil layer, but not percolating through the subsoil layer. And the water accumulates between those two layers there. And when the water capacity exceeds what the topsoil can hold, just its weight, it slips. Now we're losing topsoil, and we are just really, it's going to turn into poor reclamation results because we just don't have any topsoil left. So now at this point in the rules, the rules become less prescriptive. This gives the operators and DRMS the flexibility to create a reclamation plan that is appropriate for the post-mining land use. We can address site-specific conditions, and we can be adaptable to any kind of changing conditions. Now, in ecological terms, we call this guiding the restoration process, because plant communities that we're trying to restore cannot be installed or created with a simple recipe. What we have to do is we have to create that situation where the plant communities where they can develop on their own. Or in another restoration term, ecological term, we call this assisting in the recovery. So what does this actually look like in practice, like in our mining practices here? So the first thing is seedbed prep. In flatter regions, we can go with smooth, and this blends into the local topography. It's good for seeding equipment. We can get seeders in there. It just looks natural in flatter terrain. In mountainous terrain, we encourage rough textures, like get in there with your excavator, don't leave it pretty. I hear a lot of complaints from operators that when they're telling their equipment operators to restore it and put it back together, all equipment operators are trained to put it in a nice smooth parking lot. The mine operator's like, no, rough, I want it ugly, I want junk, I want it to look just like this picture right here. These little pockets create control erosion, can catch seed, and it actually mimics what a forest floor looks like. And we're trying to mimic the process here. So this would be a rough finish. And actually you can see the smooth finish was the New Horizon mine out in Nucla. And this rough finish was the Elk Creek mine outside of Paonia. So seed mixes, both sets of rules promotes the use of species that are natural to the surrounding area. And both rules do have provisions for introduced species, such as like alfalfa or an orchard grass. But they really do have to prove to us that this introduced species is beneficial and can be used on a limited basis. Like we don't like crested wheatgrass or smooth bromes, those kinds of things. They've proven to be create monocultures, so we don't allow those. We do, like I said, we do allow some introduced, but mostly what we want to see is native grasses to the area that you're doing your reclamation work. So the best timing for seeding is in the fall. Higher elevations, this could be a little bit more like September. Lower elevations, we can get away through November. If you're going to broadcast seed, you have to broadcast twice the recommended rate. When you get a seed bag, a seed tag, the recommended seeding rate that they give you is for a seeder. And so if you're going to broadcast, double that rate. Husbandry practices. This is kind of maintenance after planting. Irrigation, only if it supports the post-mining land use, like if it's going to be a cropland, a park, a golf course, or something that they're going to continue irrigating after bond release, then yes, we irrigate for bond release. But if it's going to be a wildlife area, the long-term advantages of irrigation on wildland areas, it's just, there isn't any. It's basically turns into a waste of water. Mulch is very good at holding. Yes. Did I hear a question? Oh, thought I heard a question. Mulch is good at holding, holds in moisture. It definitely slows erosion, but it must be crimped into the soil. If for some reason you can't, the site conditions don't allow getting a crimper in there, I don't recommend mulch because it just blows around, piles up on thick in other areas, killing your seed bank. It leaves bare areas. It's not effective. It's not crimped in. Fertilizer, again, if it only supports the land use. If you're going to have a cropland or a park or something after bond release that the post-mining land use will continue the use of fertilizer, yes, then we will do fertilizer for as part of the bond release. Other than that, don't do it. Like especially wildlife dry land areas. The native vegetation is well adapted to poor soils. When you give them a bunch of fertilizers, they don't know what to do with it. So then that turns into a lot of extra nutrients in the soil. And then here come your annual weeds. They love it. There's no competition for those resources. They're just going to take it up. So actually, fertilizer actually promotes weed invasions. Now we're just waiting for the grass to grow. We just need some time before we get the bond release. What do we expect as inspectors when we go out to the field? What do we expect to see? We know we will see invasive annual species. This is normal. And most of the time it's a lot of kochia is what we see. And first couple years, that's what we want. What we want to see is that the kochia is starting to yield to the perennials. Like I say, the native species, they just take several years to get established. The perennials will win out eventually. And, for that matter, some annuals in a plant community is actually healthy. Not a lot, like I'd say like 5 or 10% is probably a healthy number of annuals in a plant community. It's pretty low, but they are part of a plant community. And we also want to tell our operators not to graze 3 to 4 years. We need that soil structure to get developed. We need the plant roots to get developed. And because grazing animals, when they actually graze, they'll just pull the plant up, roots and all, and you're killing your crop. The coal rules say 1 year of no grazing. We try and push that off a little bit further. Mineral rules talks about just protecting from grazing until the plant community gets established. So in this 3 to 4 years, there's a lot of like professional judgment based on the inspector who's doing the work. Noxious weeds. We do expect to see noxious weeds in our reclamation area, and we try and get on and treat those very quickly. Both the coal and minerals rules do require a noxious weed plan as part of the reclamation permit. So reclamation success criteria is actually quite different between the coal and mineral rules. The mineral rules, they're more subjective and rely on the professional judgment of the specialists doing the inspection. Here's a quote from the minerals rules. The specialist must determine if the reclamation is, quote, a diverse, effective, and long-lasting vegetative cover that is capable of self-regeneration and is in at least equal in extent of cover to the natural vegetation of the surrounding area. So that leaves a lot of professional judgment up to the specialist looking at it. Now, coal rules in comparison, they're very quantitative. For starters, there is a minimum 10-year liability period from the time you plant the seeds till the time you can even apply for a bond release. Then the requirements must be met for production. There's requirements for cover, species diversity, and woody plant diversity. The rules also describe criteria for reference areas. So for coal mines, we need reference areas. Those are areas that are set off aside, that were not disturbed by mining, that was sampled before mining and after mining. And that's how we compare our data. And it's all based on these reference areas. The rules further go on to explain sampling methods and statistical demonstrations for sample adequacy. So, and after working in both these coal and minerals programs, both have advantages and both have clear disadvantages. Minerals, it's relying on the expertise of each individual inspector, and not every inspector is a veg specialist. But coal rules absolutely requires a veg specialist to understand all these statistics, and how to put all this package together of data. So advantages, disadvantages. All right, so as we're wrapping up this presentation here, I really want to circle back around to this diagram that we started with. Because we started this idea that coal and minerals and DRMS practices are designed to complement the natural process of how plant communities develop. So on the left, this is that bare exposed rock area here. And this is where we start reclamation after mining has ended. And the first thing the operator does after their mining, they put back the overburden and they put back that topsoil. And so that's putting us right in, my cursor keeps disappearing. That puts us back in this area here somewhere. This, again, now we're jump starting this process. We're really cutting out a lot of natural timing here. The annual weeds here, they do that on their own. They don't need any help from us. They seem to find every reclamation project that we ever do. Annual weeds are good at that. But then what the operator does is they come in and the operator puts in its perennial seed mix. And again, now that puts us right here. Some operators go as far as putting shrubs and trees in. Not every operator, but some do. So, so that puts us again somewhere in this area here. And what you can see is that the rules and practices we discussed, really, it just jump starts this process, really gets it kicked and get it going, and really gets the plant community on its feet to redo what it does best. So I just want to thank you for letting me share this presentation with you, and I hope you have a little bit more insight as to how we approach reclamation here at DRMS. And let me unshare my screen here. Unshared. And does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, this is Lauren. Thanks for the presentation. Definitely appreciate that. Question about what you were just mentioning there with the difference between mineral and coal reclamation success, right? Is there any effort in this upcoming rulemaking, or kind of a desire really, to make the mineral reclamation standards more similar to the coal ones?
This is Russ. The basis and purpose for their rulemaking and stuff, and that doesn't cover this at this point. But it's certainly something that we can discuss. And if the board feels like they want to adopt some of those, we can have those discussions. And that part of the issue and stuff, this is hard rock, which is only about 15% of our total permits. So we would need to bring in other stakeholders and stuff to have that conversation.
Thanks. Do you get pushback from operators when they say like, well, that's so subjective, or are they, pretty much on board with the existing process?
Right now and stuff, once in a while and stuff, we'll get somebody that's not really happy about it, but that's primarily out of frustration because it's the reclamation isn't going as planned. But for the most part, the board, the operators and stuff they're trying to work hand in hand and stuff because it's in their best interest to get that done so they can get that permit released. So,
sure, okay, thank you.
If I could add a couple comments to your thought there, the coal rules are, while they're very rigorous, they're very cumbersome, and the mine operators can't usually can't do that kind of work. They don't have the expertise to do the design, the veg sampling, and all that stuff. They have to hire outside consultants. So to put that kind of burden on some of our 110 operators or little mom and pop operators, we would just have to consider what we're asking of our other, especially our smaller operators. Now, maybe we could split the rules and say 112s have to do this, 110s don't have to do it. That would be something to consider. So that's a burden we would have to consider putting it on. The other question I would have to ask is, have we had a lot of unsuccessful reclamation in minerals rules to justify doing this level of rules that the coal has? I think that was something we would have to just all of us discuss of, is this necessary? Now, like I say, because both systems have their advantages and disadvantages. And in some ways, I think right now it's working well. Like if we have run into problems, I would say yes. Now, Russ might have something to do and might hear something different about the minerals hard rock success criteria. Have we been making it? Have we had good success stories or not? So those would be two background questions I would think we need to consider before we consider changing rules.
Sure, thanks.
Yeah, those are good points and stuff. Thanks, Brock. So.
Just, on some of these mines, especially in the mountains and stuff, it would appear to me that after that material's been taken out, the terrain changes enough that when the final 10, 15, 20 years down the road, when the final reclamation, the mining and then the reclamation is there, you've changed, the composition of the terrain, like it's less steep or it's more flat. So the cover that you would put on there, the plant cover, wouldn't necessarily be the same. What do you do? Just predict what would be there and try and figure that into the plan when you're putting together the reclamation plan at the time of the permit? Am I kind of clear on where I'm headed?
Yeah, I think so. Brock, do you want to answer that, or do you want me to?
I can start.
Okay.
All reclamation plans have to be determined before mining starts. And we have to do a pre-operational inspection before mining starts. And that gives us an idea of what they're planning, what the topography looks like beforehand, what their proposed change topography will look like. And it is their reclamation plan feasible for what they're proposing. We also ask questions about post-mining land use, like what is the surrounding land uses around? And so like the topography and the things that they're proposing in their reclamation plan, is it appropriate for areas outside of the permit area? We don't want to put steep cliffs back into a flat area, but if it's an area already has a lot of steep cliffs, okay, we'll consider steep cliffs. And so we really do our best to look outside the permit to help determine what inside is going to look like so it doesn't stand out.
And to add for Brock, is one of the biggest challenges we have is a lot of our older permits. When you look at some of our permits and stuff from the early 70s and 80s, especially in hard rock, and I know of a few in construction materials, it wasn't a big deal. Some of these were pre-law, so there was no topsoil. So the big challenge and stuff with the division and the operator is being able to kind of establish some kind of topsoil-like material, which involves a lot of review and introduction of organics and other things and stuff, and that to help get basically sterile waste rock and stuff to build to support some kind of vegetation. And under the rule, it says that reclamation has to be completed within 5 years, but there's also the little there's a phrase in there and stuff that allows the division to extend that. And that's where in some of these older mine sites and stuff where we have to wait that additional time and stuff that allows us to do that without penalizing the operator for not getting that complete. We're waiting for the grass to grow, and sometimes, especially in Western Colorado, in canyon country and that, it could take 7 to 10 years and stuff for those sites and stuff to get any type of vegetation to go at all. So those are the things and stuff that we have to consider.
It
Thanks,
would seek-
Brock and Russ. I just had a quick question.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. I'm curious, has there been any discussion on like long-term monitoring, like a statewide plan for long-term monitoring to go back to a site, like say that's adjacent to a riparian zone, to an affected stream that might have been near a mine, and do like, you know, progressive like tree planting, willows, things like that, that can kind of expedite a specific like riparian habitat or any wetlands adjacent to affected areas from mining?
When we're looking at the mining plans and they're close to wetlands, or they have wetlands and stuff that are going to be disturbed, that's all calculated into the reclamation. We'll look at specific wetlands, seed mixtures, also like for lakes and stuff along the shorelines, seed mixes and stuff that'll help support the wildlife or the riparian areas. And where one of the biggest challenges and stuff that we find is the mortality rate and stuff for trees. It's really, really, really hard and stuff to get trees to go. So a lot of the higher mountain areas and stuff get volunteers to come in, and we're thrilled with that. But that's why a lot of our reclamation plans don't necessarily have trees in there. We have shrubs and other things and stuff. So we're trying to establish that community so that it will take off from that point forward. But as far as monitoring after we release it and stuff, we do not go back in and take a look at it. I think the Inactive Mines program does a few things and stuff on theirs in that, but when we sign off on it and stuff, it's well established. And the idea and stuff is that hopefully those kind of tree species and stuff that'll come in at a later date. And I know going past some sites and stuff that I personally released back 10, 15 years ago and stuff, and that there's trees there now and stuff and that. So that philosophy and stuff and that works in some places anyway. So
Cool, thanks.
Yeah, and one more point I'd like to add to that is we're the Division of Reclamation, Mining and Safety. That's our focus, is really to minimize the impacts of mining. Now, when does that stop? You can get into a big, long philosophical argument, like the timing of that. But really, our jurisdiction ends once we release that permit, once we've put it all back together. And, because when you start getting into long-term monitoring, long-term land uses like that, you start getting into a lot of stakeholders really get interested, and everybody has an opinion. And that's not really our forte. We're there to protect the public from protect the public, protect the environment from the effects of mining. And really the way our rules are written, that's pretty short term. And that's kind of the end of our jurisdiction there. So we start running into jurisdictional issues when we start going back to sites, looking at long-term effects, looking at replanting and doing all that stuff. So it's that I try not to read our permits too much into that long-term stuff because we're out of our jurisdiction.
I would say though that I think we need, especially in our climate challenges right now in our state and other places, we need an adaptive attitude in terms of how we proceed as time runs along. And I think that's real important because the challenge is to try and leave this place a little better than we found it. So and things change. I mean, over 20 years, how much change? The machinery changes, the climate's changed, the seed program, the knowledge, all those kind of things. So I think we need to stay tuned on all those kind of things as time runs along.
I totally agree with you, and I could think of more things that I would like to do for mining and to help with those things. But again, it's just jurisdictional. What can I do and stay within what the rules tell me I can do?
We need to look at changing the rules.
That's a different conversation.
You bet. Yeah.
That's part of this one.
Yeah. And point well taken, Chairman Singletary. Okay, Brock, are you done then? Are we all
I
squared away?
just,
Oh, no?
I don't have a question. I have a plug, and I think that maybe you all were involved with it as well, but the National Mining Hall of Fame and Museum up in Leadville just did a new exhibit on reclamation. Climax used a couple of their examples. There's, just different examples. So I think sometimes it's great to be able to, either drive by a mine site that you're familiar with or just see some of these reclamation photos. And, I think there's some good examples from things that were done in the 90s, things that are being done now, how things are done, piezometers. There's a cross section of some soil sampling. So when you get a chance, go check that out. Or if people have questions too about what the process is, I think it's another great resource for people to go see.
No, you're just trying to show off. You
No, I didn't.
To drive over Fremont Pass and see what you've done. You've done a great job, by the way. That's a great model.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, but I think I was listening, talking about the seed mixes and stuff. So what do you do for a seed mix that's up there at 12,000 feet? And there's the Climax seed mix, because that's what you had to do. And I think we certainly go back in and work at that and work at the wetlands. And it's probably one of those places where we have certain areas that are released, but we're sort of doing this work. And we always say this, we're doing it in tandem, especially these large operators with your operation still going on, but you're still on the ground, being able to monitor things, being able to look at this long-term stuff. So, Brock, I appreciate your perspective when you're talking about some things like a small, 110 versus a 112, where you have capacity to look at climate, look at monitoring, always be doing, this stuff internally versus a 110. I think we have to be thoughtful about that.
Well,
Yeah,
and
we're kind of charged with promoting mining here, as our rules kind of tell us. We got to
Exactly.
promote mining.
Exactly.
So I try and work with operators, to do the best reclamation, but really consider what is that burden beyond the rules that I don't want to put on a mine operator that would
Right.
hinder them from being a successful miner also.
It needs to be a partnership deal, no question.
Yeah.
And to close this out and some of that, one of the things is stuff that we give out reclamation awards and stuff for innovative ideas and those are the kind of things and stuff that when we see interesting things, those are the kind of things that the bigger operators that have the budget and the expertise to do that, we can take some of those things and stuff and bring them to the smaller operators and stuff, so that it's like, maybe we should try this, or you could try this because it was successful here or there. And that certainly helps the smaller operators and stuff. And that's where Brock and the specialists and stuff and that, with the knowledge that we have, we try to help those smaller people, smaller operators. So, all right. So I guess any other questions or comments on that before we get into the next one? So
I just want to say thanks, Brock.
Yep.
Hey, thanks so much.
Yep. So, okay, it's my turn to jump on and give you a riveting discussion on the history of temporary cessation. Can everybody see my slides now?
No.
No. Screen two. Okay, wait. Hit the right button there. All right, now.
Yep, you're good.
Okay, good. So today is stuff we want to take a little bit of time to talk about the general history of temporary cessation. This is not intended to start the discussions and stuff on rulemaking, but rather it's just a general discussion on the background before we go into the formal process, so that the board understands the background behind it, so that when we start talking about the issues and stuff currently, you have an understanding of it. So this is informal. So if you have some questions and stuff about the history and stuff, please feel free to jump in and interrupt me and stuff in that, and we'll go from there. So as I noted, this is a temporary cessation primer in history. A couple of the things and stuff that we'll be talking about, go go back to the statute with the definitions in 34, 32, 103 about development. We talk about the life of mine and the mining operations. And one of the big things and stuff in that we're going to be looking at is the fact that production is undefined. So I did not copy those rules because some of the like specifically 6A and stuff would be like 3 slides or whatever. So for the board, though that's just references and stuff for future reading and stuff if you feel so inclined. It's important for the board to understand that the history of how temporary cessation issues originally arose and in relation to uranium mining and also hard rock permits in general. This goes all the way back to 1989, where a lot of our permitted uranium operators and stuff were actually ending their second temporary cessation. And the records are really poor at best for the details of how some decisions were made, but based on file communications, the staff recommended to the board that the sites be placed into what was known as an intermittent status. If you look at Rule 6 and stuff, they talk about intermittent operations. So that's where this intermittent status came from. And that recommendation was based on the fact that the mining activities during the second temporary cessation at these sites were more in line with mining operations. They weren't necessarily totally inactive. So at that time, the board and stuff took a look at that and decided that it should have been, they should have been intermittent in an intermittent status and not in TC. So to remind the board in that back till about 1995 or so, all decisions were made by the board. Everything from technical revisions to a succession of operators, everything went through the board. The staff, we made recommendations to that board, and then the board made all the decisions. It wasn't until 1995 and stuff where that shifted, where the staff actually had the authority and stuff to make those decisions and stuff. So for a little bit of context there. So in May and June of 1990, the record reflects that the board approved technical revisions that took these sites out of TC and placed them into this intermittent status. And then the division used that a decision by the board to approve some others and stuff during that same time period. So fast forward now, and that these permits and stuff remained in this intermittent status until from the early 1990s until about 2005, 2006. So these sites were there for about 15 years or more based on that decision. However, what happened and stuff was, first of all, we didn't have a field office at the time. So everything was done out of Denver. So going out to the Western Slope to look at inspect sites and stuff that were reporting little or no activity, they were low priority for the staff and stuff because the staffing levels were different. So they were low priority and stuff at that time. But when you go back and look at the annual reports and some of the inspections and stuff, it indicated a very minimal amount of activity. But in 2005, 2006, some, but not all of the mines and stuff reactivated. There was a jump in the price of uranium. And so it was a little bit like the Wild West out there. Literally when I was doing inspections, there was helicopters flying over and dropping survey stakes for claims and stuff. And then it was really kind of a wild couple of years. And then the price dropped out. Part of that was due to the increase of fuel. And then the economy was slowing down. And then those mines kind of went back into minimal activity. At this time and stuff, in that the division started having conversations that were initiated by environmental groups about the lack of the mining activities at some of these sites, and pointing to the temporary cessation definitions for production and other requirements for intermittent operations. So the division took a look at that, and they realized and stuff that if you looked at the definitions and stuff of what for intermittent operators, they had to be active for some period, but less than 180 days. And then to be considered active, they needed to be active for most of the year. So what we did is we decided to do a programmatic review of all of the permits. We realized and stuff, this didn't need to, this shouldn't be just one particular part of the Hard Rock, but to take a look at everything and stuff there. So on January 24th of 2012, the division notified all Hard Rock mines and stuff of this programmatic review. And part of that was we gave the operators some options. One was to demonstrate that they were in compliance with the definition of intermittent status, which means that they were operating for at least half of the year, 180 days or less, but they had to be active. It could give us a notice of reactivation and kick in into mining activities. They could also, if they think they were done, they can notify us that they were commencing reclamation in that, which means they didn't have to go into temporary cessation. Or the fourth option was to place the site into temporary TC. So in those conversations and stuff back in 2012 and stuff, the division made it clear that we were going to support the initial TC requests and stuff in that time frame. The support was based on the kind of a resetting of the TC process to closer interpretations of the law and out of a perceived fairness to the operators, because the board had made some decisions and stuff back in 1989, 1990, and they were doing what they were told. So it was never our intentions to penalize an operator for historic approved activities, but rather to draw a line in the sand and say, we're moving forward. This is how we need to take a look at this and stuff and that moving forward. So we also noted and stuff that based on some facts and stuff and that we may not support a second period of temporary cessation if that came to pass, and the facts didn't support it. So the majority of the permitted sites went into their first temporary cessation, and most of those and stuff have now exhausted their second temporary cessation, and that several of them are going into full reclamation and that. So that's where we're at as far as that goes. Some things have changed here recently. The board is aware of the Van Four decision. You know, the operator came before the board requesting a second TC. We recommended and stuff based on the historical facts and stuff that we didn't think that was necessary. The board disagreed, and that's, you're right and stuff, and they granted a second term of TC. That decision and stuff was appealed by environmental groups to district court, and then that decision was then appealed by the operator, I believe, and stuff. And with that, the appeals court came back with a decision that remanded that back to the board, and the important part of that is that in the appellate court notes, it says that temporary cessation is a factual status rather than a legal status. And it preempted any resetting of the effective date of TC done in 2012 and that. So while the board and the division acted in good faith out of what was a perceived for a fairness of operators, the appellate court decision clearly does not allow for some other factors and stuff to be considered there. So that is a really brief, condensed history of TC from the beginning to where we're at today. So going into rulemaking, and this is the only place where I'll really talk about rulemaking, is what some of the issues that have come out of this history is we need to define production. In the statute, it talks about development, and it talks about mining operations and exploration and prospecting, but it never defines production. And has created some heartburn as to what the activities and stuff are and stuff that are should be considered as part of mining operations and production in general. We're going to clarify when it's appropriate to apply temporary cessation. We're reworking and clarifying the process for going into the initial and the second TC status, so that it's clearly more defined and stuff for our operators, outside stakeholders, and the board. And then one of the most, another important aspect is defining the process of coming out of TC. Right now and stuff, the rules just basically say, we'll send you a letter and that, and we have to come back and stuff and ask for details and stuff to ensure that the activities and stuff and that are actually to a level and stuff and that to bring them out of TC. So with that, is there any questions or any comments or anything and stuff in that as we move into our get ready to start moving into rulemaking? So I know that was really fast. So but like I said, it's the history, a long history, and that, and hopefully with the rulemaking and stuff, we can clear up and make things and stuff a little bit clearer and stuff for operators, for staff, and of course and stuff the board.
Russ, this is Lauren. Question for you. Two questions. So during the 2013 to 2015 period, you mentioned that the division supported entering into primary TC, but then noted you might not support the second one. That was just based on like a case-by-case process. So like what you mentioned with the sort of the longer story there, where if something hadn't been active for years and years, then maybe that didn't make sense for the second term. But it wasn't sort of a blanket decision for all of these operators.
That is correct and stuff. In 2006 and 7, there were several of the mines that were active, and that, so in our, drawing a line of stuff, we pointed to that mining activity, and because it was over an 18-month period or whatever. So by any definition and stuff, and that was, mining operations, and they sold uranium and stuff in that for those sites. So in those cases and stuff, we supported that.
Okay.
Yeah, and and then there were some and stuff that just were sitting there not doing anything, or had not done anything and stuff since the 1990s or whatever, and those are the ones and stuff and that we didn't support. So
okay. And then my second question is about that factual status. Can you explain what that means a little bit more?
Well, it's more of a looking at the records and everything else and stuff in that to base what the activity was in that so that kind of, that's why it ties back into what production really is, in that, whether it includes all mining operations, which historically that's what the division staff looked at, is they're out there doing a lot of they're doing activities. It wasn't necessarily tied to the sale of the product, but there are a lot of activities and stuff that are involved in that. So that's historically how we looked at that, and so that's part of the facts and stuff that we need to kind of connect the dots on and stuff and that in this process, is to at least, I don't want to say everybody's satisfaction, but it'll be more or less to everybody's understanding. So
yeah. Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
Has there been, or will there be, stakeholder engagement from operators that have dealt with temporary cessation, and just to hear their perspective on challenges and kind of what they did and what their experience was like, just to give a broad perspective as we dive into the rulemaking?
yes, part of what you'll see and stuff in your packet and stuff is we've had a lengthy informal stakeholder process, and it has involved both environmental groups and mining, both mining association, CMA, and also some individual mine operators and stuff. So they've had that lengthy input and stuff in this process. And then several of them will be, we anticipate and stuff will declare and stuff to be part of the formal process. But that, yeah, it's been ongoing, and they're all very keenly aware and stuff of the discussions and engaged in that.
Great, thanks.
Just for clarification, Russ, so the TC, the temporary cessation, is unique to uranium activities only?
No, I'm sorry, in that it's for any mining operation, and it also
Okay.
includes construction materials. The focus of this is the history behind that, because that's kind of the driver for hard rock. But after we did this for the hard rock side of it, we also did that for construction materials in 2013. I think it's stuff. Tony and I sent out that letter and stuff to construction materials, so that we were being consistent across all of our permits, not just this one specific area. And so that's what we look at everything and stuff for all of these sites now, not just this particular segment.
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
Okay, well, great. Well, thank you
Okay.
for your time.
So are we really, we're formally finished with what we need on the agenda? Is that correct? For today?
Yes, other than executive session.
Well, I want to make sure we ask for public comment if there's anybody that is available and or chooses to make public comment. I guess you don't know of anybody, Cammie,
I
right?
don't know of anybody.
Okay,
Oh, hold on.
all right.
All right. So I just need to, I guess you guys, Chuck, you want to take it from here?
Yeah, so
Chuck, you want to go ahead and put us in, help us into executive session, and then we'll let Cammie rearrange the paraphernalia.
yeah, so we'll need a motion to go into executive session. There's a draft one on page 26 of the packet. Vote.
Somebody want to make that motion? It's on the sheet in our package.
Yeah, I'll do it. I move that the board enter into executive session for the purpose of discussing with counsel disputes that are subject pending or imminent court action, discussing specific claims or grievances, receiving legal advice on specific legal questions, and discussing matters required to be kept confidential pursuant to Colorado Revised Statutes Section 24-6-402, Parent 3, Parent A, Parent 2, including Inform versus MLRB 2020 CV 33848, Parent Denver District Court, Fontenary versus MLRB 2021 CA 001021, Parent Colorado Court of Appeals, Fontenary versus MLRB 2021 CA 000941, Colorado Court of Appeals.
Is there a second?
I'll second it. Anthony.
Okay, thank you, Anthony. It's been moved and seconded. I would, for the record, I would state that we have a minimum of 2/3 of the board are present, so that we can go into executive session.
You're good.
With that, we're good to go, Cammie?
Mhm. Yep.
Okay,
Yeah, just vote.
okay, Chuck.
John, you just need to
Okay,
vote.
hold on. Let me go ahead and stop all the recording stuff. Unless, Chuck, is there something you have to read first?
Yeah. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
We just need a vote too.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I didn't ask for the vote. All those in favor of going into executive session signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, same sign. Hearing none, the motion passes and we're in executive session.